LinkedIn preview is coming online. Cool.
We set to go?
Yep, going live.
Okay.
This may take a few seconds. Okay, we're live.
We are live. Okay. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Surviving Humanity stream. I'm Andrew. That's Wesley. And we're here to do the book club today for the first time. So excited to do that. And I think, shall we just dive on in?
Yep.
All right. And well, if you ever wondered how to make more friends and be more persuasive, in today's exclusive book club episode, we're looking at that through our review of How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. We read the book for you, so we can share some essential information with you and how the book's concepts show up in your day to day life. We'll talk about our individual praises for the book while addressing some critiques of the overall material. And we'll give you a recommendation. Who's this book for? And, we'll rate it out of 5 stars. Everyone loves ratings. Um, and we'll move on to some Q&A, round everything out. So without further ado, welcome everyone to Surviving Humanity, a self-help podcast where we shift your perspective to help you overcome the obstacles in your life. We're Wesley Jackson and Andrew Gilley, and we hope to foster a sense of connection and community over our common struggles while providing you with the tools to overcome them. And as always, our Facebook, subreddit, and Twitter are the best places to go for community, connection, and support. And links are in the show notes. So let's get started. Essential book information. What do you have, Wes?
Cool. So, this book is divided into 4 parts, and each of these 4 parts contains a different number of principles. And these 4 parts of the book are fundamentals when communicating with people, how to make people like you, how to persuade people, and then lastly, how to be a leader, aka how to change people. And so, at the
Mm-hmm.
core of the book, though, is this requirement of authenticity, which I really like since that's also my number one core value. And the book doesn't really teach you these skills to try and manipulate you, but rather to become a better person. And so ultimately, a more authentic version of yourself. What would you say, Andrew? How do you think you describe it?
I'll give a little background on the author and the context in which it was written. I think that helps a little bit. So Dale Carnegie, no relation to Andrew Carnegie, but as a fun fact, he did change his last name to be spelled the same way. Uh, he's an American author. He was born 1888, and so growing up, uh, you know, that was a big time for American business and learning from people there, and kind of a rags to riches story. He was a poor boy on a Mississippi farm, and grew up to be an adept salesman and speaker. We've all heard this story 100 times before, but he did it pretty early. He was one of the first people to sort of do that kind of story, and he started out public speaking coaching and evolved from there to cover aspects of more aspects of life, like this book. And he writes one later called "How to Stop Worrying and Start Living." Um, so he was kind of all over that personal development field. He wrote a lot about Lincoln and how Lincoln was good and Lincoln's daily routines. So he was an early adopter of that as well, looking at famous people and seeing what they do differently than others. So yeah, that's kind of where we're coming from here. It's a very early book, so a lot of the stuff is very basic, and that's good, I think, in a lot of ways. It really helps to drill down into basic stuff and kind of let you know what are the basic building blocks of making decent conversation to, be a little bit more agreeable, a little bit more pleasant.
Yeah, speaking of conversation, how would you say that the book's concepts show up in our daily lives?
Well, I was a pretty awkward kid, pretty antisocial kid. I was not really very good at like social interaction, and I did read this at 12-ish, 12 or 13, and it did help me. So that's, you know, I kind of needed advice. Like if you smile, people like you more, and listen attentively, because I never, I didn't know the rules. I didn't know the rules of like socially interacting. So, this was helpful here. I think that's why I think the basics are super helpful. Coming back to the basics is really, really good. And, some people need the basics. I certainly needed them. So I was happy to have them.
Yeah, I'm actually right with you there. I was the same way. I needed to like memorize some of these things. I'm like, oh yeah, smile more because people like that, and people like to reciprocate as well, and the
Yeah.
whole mirroring thing as well. Something I'm mindful of now.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, we have conversations with people on a daily basis, and so every conversation, like this book says, is an opportunity to grow and learn more about ourselves as an end result. And so this all begins with like this a shift in perspective. And it's also an opportunity to connect with other people. And this book, kind of in a nutshell, is a testament to all of that.
Mhm. For sure. And it's good to understand people better, regardless of the context of it. And you're not always going to get what you want. It's how to influence people, not how to control people. You can't, make people do what you want. But it's about just applying the principles of conversation lets you connect and understand with people better. And I think that leads to good outcomes in all aspects of your life, even if you're not really looking at the business aspect of it, or if you're not willing to, I suppose, just do it for the sake of bettering yourself, you'll get good outcomes, even if you look at it purely instrumentally. So, pretty much no matter what angle you come at it, it's good to connect with people. It's going to help you in every aspect of your life.
Yeah,
So,
I agree.
right. Yeah. So, what'd you like? What'd you like about the book?
Well, when I first read it years ago, I don't even remember how long ago now. The my biggest takeaway that I got was to use people's names more often, like when you address them. So I use that a lot in emails. That's like a good kind of standard best practice in email marketing, for example, where you like personalize emails with people's first names. Because like the quote from the book from How to Win Friends and Influence People goes, remember that a person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language. And so, there's even like scientific research out there that shows that we are able to literally hear our name more easily than any other word. And so this also comes in handy when you're trying to wake somebody up or get their attention, in a crowded like grocery store or something like that, for example. What about you,
Yeah.
Andrew?
Um, just being a little bit more pleasant is a great thing that the book kind of teaches you to do. I, you know, I tend to criticize the one of the book's rules is never criticize, condemn, or complain, and I don't listen to that one really. But I do try to do it in the right context. Criticizing, condemning, complaining. We do that on the podcast. We're doing kind of a cultural critique sort of thing a lot of the time. So there's that in there. It's good to criticize institutions and cultures and like power, but it's not really good to like go up to people in your life and just start picking at them. And I did used to do that, not really out of any kind of malice, but um because I thought people would want to know what mistakes they were making. Everybody, because to me it felt like everyone was always pointing them out to me, and anyway, um but it's good to draw that line. It's good to know when you should be like, and criticism is good in certain contexts too, both for personal improvement and also just it's good to criticize powerful things that are bad. But it's also good to know when to appreciate the people around you and the context in which you should be more positive when connecting with other people. It's not that you should never do it. Criticizing something with somebody that you both dislike is a lot of fun, but it's important to be grounded in a good understanding of being interpersonally likable and approachable. Because if you're just criticizing, condemning, or complaining about everything all the time, then you're just kind of giving out negative energy and you're less fun to be around. So striking that line is really helpful for me personally, because I tended to go way overboard on the negativity. But it doesn't help when you're a depressed teenager, clinically depressed teenager. That's the most negative type of person you can be. Uh,
Yeah. That kind of goes into my point that I was also going to talk about, which was appreciation versus criticism, and
Mhm.
how the book emphasizes, the effectiveness of reinforcement over punishment, for example. So the quote from the book goes, "Be hearty in your approbation and lavish in your praise." And so part 4 of the book in particular really brings this home with what can really essentially be considered a step-by-step guide to getting people to do what you want, and it all begins with praise and honest appreciation, because I think that's how you get people's guard, and walls to come down, and allows them to that kind of, safe space, so to speak, to be themselves and be more vulnerable. And so I think that's really powerful. And, rereading this book has helped remind me that I still need to continue to work on applying this part in my own life, because I, like, just like you said, I'm prone to criticizing, and, largely due to the way that I was raised, but I need to still continue to work on undoing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think gratitude's a key point in the book, and that's helpful because genuine, it's always be grateful for what people are doing, and give praise to people. It's very important because genuine gratitude does a lot. It's good for other people. People like being complimented, but it's also like good for yourself. Being grateful cognitively locks you out of certain emotions. It's very difficult to be angry when you're expressing gratitude, for instance. So it helps a lot in recognizing what we value in our lives and maintaining our own mental health through the appreciation of others. So I like that point of it. It's very good to start from a point of appreciation.
I agree. What about critiques? What would you say?
Well, I mean, the most common criticism of the book and is that it's manipulative. And it is a little bit, maybe, if you take the most uncharitable reading of it. You could use these techniques to be manipulative, but it's not just that, or it wouldn't be nearly as good a book as it is. He spends a lot of time talking about Carnegie does, talking about understanding the perspective behind other people's views. And that's an important point. It's sort of how do you avoid getting, lost in the sauce, so to speak, to allow yourself to recognize the important parts of it. You don't just want to get people to do what you want. You want to make them understand you too. You want both sides' perspectives to be shared and understood by the other person. This is a process of collaboration. It's less a manipulative process because if you're the boss, like some of the people in this book are, you could just tell somebody to do something and they'll have to do it. Uh, but you can't always really do that, and uh, it's going to lead to negativity there. Um, you know, the biggest criticism I have, honestly, is that a lot of this has become and this isn't Carnegie's fault. A lot of this has become so internalized at this point that every business school or every business you work at will just kind of teach it. People are kind of guarded against niceness or something. That's why it has to be authentic. He says in the book, flattery will get you nowhere. It has to be genuine niceness. But even then, people will clock genuine niceness as flattery. So I guess my criticism is that the 100-year-old book didn't accurately anticipate what today is like at the end, which is silly. But, just be aware that this is a well-read book. People know a lot of this stuff already. And so it's not a one-to-one application. You're going to have to do some of your own thinking to update the concepts a little bit. That doesn't mean it's not valuable, but it does need some thinking and modification.
Yeah, that was my only critique, as well as that there would be I would say, a decent amount of content for most people that is probably common sense, especially in part 2, when it comes to how to make people like you. But besides that, as someone who's, not neurotypical or whatever, I found this book really helpful with navigating communication specifically, and, like, nurturing relationships as a result of that. But with that said, I still feel like this is a powerful book for anybody at the end of the day, because it teaches healthy communication. And, this results in healthier and more abundant relationships in general. And that sounds like a win-win to me. So,
Sure.
who else would we say this book is for, though? And how? how many stars would you give it out of 5?
All right. I think it. I said it was outdated, but I think it's useful as a foundation for anyone. Anybody who doesn't really know what to do in a social interaction. That's usually younger people, but not always. Um, but I mean, it does wonders. Anybody can benefit from the advice to like admit your mistakes, take responsibility, and giving other people the benefit of the doubt. That's a big one. That one's hard for me sometimes. But so it's good for anybody to get reminded on these basics. And it's a book you can reread and get some more out of. Carnegie actually says this in the book. He says to reread the book, which, of course he's going to, but it is good advice because it helps you understand the stories. He tells a little bit more and helps it sink in. I'd say 4 stars with the understanding that a lot of the practical examples aren't as solid as they used to be, but I would still give it 4 stars and recommend it to people who are less comfortable in social situations, I would say. And anyone who just feels like, okay, let me break it down to basics this time. If you're looking to do one of those two, if you're either uncomfortable or you're looking for a basics refresher, I think it's a good book for you.
Yeah, I agree. Anyone who wants to improve their communication, enhance their relationships, or make new or more friends. But as I mentioned also really briefly, I feel this book is particularly powerful for people who are not neurotypical, for example, like people who are autistic, have ADHD, things like that. This book provides people like that with a step-by-step playbook of sorts, I would say, to navigating conversations and making sure that you actually get something out of them, or not only just take from them and you do give something back and actually, make that reciprocation process happen. I can tell you from firsthand experience that the book does help with that. And with that said, though, like I've said, part 2 may be redundant for a lot of people. So I don't think this book is perfect because of that. So I would give it a 4.5 out of 5 stars if we can do half stars.
Mhm.
But it's, definitely still one of the best books out there at the end of the day for self-improvement. And it was really nice getting to go through it again after such a long time. And I'm thinking that maybe I'll print out a poster probably on my wall with those principles that are found within the book, because I think it's really nice to refer back to them on a regular basis, just like you said, how he mentioned in the book. It's something that's worth rereading. I totally agree with that statement.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So now we've got live Q&A,
Mhm.
right? You want
We
to
do.
start with one of our predetermined questions?
Sure.
Okay. So which principle from the book do you think is most important, Andrew, and why?
Yeah. Uh, I think. mm, I think I'd still want to highlight the criticizing, condemning, and complaining principle here as one that's most useful specifically for making friends, for making acquaintances. And I think that's important because not only just for being pleasant, but it also helps you reframe in your head things that might otherwise be unpleasant. It's like, how can I frame this in such a way that it appeals better to the other person? How can I frame this in a way that lets me see that there's positive things to this? Because there's something I heard once a long time ago, and I can tell you specifically what it's from. It's from the old StarCraft streamer Day9. We're doing a real throwback today, if you know who that is. If not, don't worry about it. But what he said is he always tried to, instead of just apologizing, because he tended to apologize a lot, as is something I do. It's saying thank you instead. So saying thank you so much for being accommodating instead of, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And that reframing helped me a lot. And I think that's really at that kind of message at the heart of what Carnegie's getting at there is once you're not criticizing, condemning, or complaining, because that apology would, the focus is there on condemning your bad actions instead of praising the other person for theirs. And that's gratitude. We talked earlier about how important gratitude is. So I think learning to think about your criticisms, your condemnations, and your complaints in different lights is really important for not only improving your own mental health, but also, making sure that you aren't putting people off with being too negative, and your negativity, then has more of an impact. If you're constantly negative all the time, it's all the same thing. If you pick carefully those moments, then it becomes a lot more powerful too. Your complaints become more powerful. So
It's like the boy who cried wolf. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So that's a lot of benefit you can get out of really interrogating that concept. There's a lot behind there once you start thinking about what you have to do when you're not criticizing, condemning, you're complaining. You unlock a lot of stuff.
Yeah, if you don't do that all the time, you do get a lot of free time back. um, so I think the principle that was most important to me out of the book was try honestly to see things from the other person's point of view. Like you said, he really tries to hammer that point home a lot. And that's, because I think this is the first stepping stone to really cultivating empathy in people, which I think is really important. I believe empathy is one of the most important qualities that one can have. And that's probably because compassion's my number 5 core value. But empathy is essential in building and, mending bridges as well, between perspectives and people as a result. And so this really helps you form a more holistic worldview as well as an end result. And I think that, benefits everybody ultimately at the end of the day. Do you think there should be any new principles added to the book, Andrew, to maybe update it a little bit more to this modern time?
I think I think there's one main difference is that we don't really use the word friend the way Carnegie uses it here. It's more like acquaintance, really. The way
Yeah.
he uses how to gain friends is more like gaining acquaintances, which isn't bad. I have lots of acquaintances. I like them, but like just being nice and smiling all the time, and being pleasant and complimentary will get you a lot of acquaintances. But to form a deep friendship, you have to kind of go beyond that. So I maybe tweak the language a little bit. It's not really a new principle, but an understanding that we're not talking about, you can't do this and then expect somebody to be your best friend and confide in you and emotionally support you during like the hardest times in your life. That's not the kind of friendship you get out of only doing the things in this book. You should still do a lot of these things, don't be overly negative around your friends and stuff, but or do, honestly, if you're very close. That's one of the few people who can, but that's what I mean. It's that some of these principles aren't tailored for deep, meaningful friendship. They're for, meeting people at the bar and having a good time or getting along at work.
Yeah.
So I would just use the word friend a little bit differently and then maybe, I don't know, that's kind of outside of the scope of the book to actually give advice on it. But I'd say we should probably be careful what we're talking about when we use the word winning friends, because it might give a false impression.
Yeah, I could
And
see
just,
that.
yeah. How about you? Anything new you want to put in?
I don't think that there needs to be any new principles added to the book. There already are a lot to learn within there since it is
Yeah.
divided into 4 parts. And I feel that they're all still relevant today also. And so, they're pretty timeless um, and universal. And so I think that's why this book has been so popular for so long and it's withstood this test of time. And it's generally regarded as one of the best in like the self-improvement or self-help, category or genre of books. And so, I think it just kind of the proof is in the pudding right there.
Yep. Yeah. And, it's got real staying power. So, what do you struggle with? We talked a little bit about this, but we can elaborate a little more. What principle do you struggle with applying in your life?
Yeah. I struggle the most when it comes to showing respect for other people's opinions, and never saying that you're wrong. So both of these are things that are said within the book. And so I feel like a lot of other people do too. I hope maybe I'm just trying to make myself feel better here. but especially in today's divisive political climate. And so, I feel a bit less bad about this as a result of that. But I'll elaborate a little bit more on why I struggle with this principle in particular. It's because I have quite the attachment to, like, what I consider truth, and judgment is one of my key strengths. So while I don't often explicitly say, like, you are wrong to people, I do tend to, enlighten people with my research. And that usually is forming some sort of counterpoint to a statement that they made. And so I can be like contrarian, I guess, in that regard. And at the end of the day, though, the truth, I guess, is seemingly irrelevant, and that's like what the book pretty much corroborates as well. It says, like, when dealing with people, remember that you are not dealing with creatures of logic, that's ourselves included, but with creatures bristling with prejudice and motivated by pride and vanity. And so, to rephrase this a bit more nicely, us humans rarely base ourselves around logic. We're much more often to base our perspectives and, thus who we are a lot of the times, on feelings and emotions. And so this is something that I've been coming to terms with more and more over time recently, because I'm trying to work on continuing to repair those social ties that I've mentioned, that I kind of neglected over the years. So, what about you, Andrew? What do you struggle with the most in regards to the principles in the book?
Well, listening quietly is a skill that the book talks about a lot, and I tend to go one way or the other with it. Uh, when I first read this, I would just like not talk at all back to people, which was also not that's also not really what you want out of a conversation. There are some people like that. Some people can go, "Wow, you're a great conversationalist," and you haven't said a word in 20 minutes. That has happened to me before, but but I do have trouble letting people talk when I get excited. If I start getting on a roll or excited, I have a tendency to cut people off. I'm not trying to be rude. It's one, I'm just excited, and two is I don't want to forget what I'm going to say, because I have this happen to me a lot where it's like I am, I want to think of what I'm going to say, and then like the conversation shifts to a new direction, and I'm like, no, I can never say it again. And then, but at this point, I'm not really listening anymore. Now I'm just thinking about what I want to say, and and when the conversation shifts, I'm like, no, 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 it needs to go back, but it's gone. It's gone. I have to let it go. This is the sort of thing. It's
Yeah, you have
s-
FOMO.
yeah, FOMO for conversations. Uh, Yeah, you're just focusing on how the conversation is going for you. It's like this is the danger of a lot of the stuff in the book, and it's something I had to struggle with. You can overcorrect too. You can absolutely overcorrect. So you kind of want to get the you want to thread the needle. You want to get it right. You want to hit the arrow. You want to kind of get right in the middle between talking too little and talking too much. And nobody's going to be a perfect conversation partner every time. It's important to remember that too. Some days you're going to be tired or angry or whatever. And, we're all human. So you're not going to be knocking it out of the park every single time. But yeah, that's what I have to keep in mind a lot is to not just switch. Here's what it is. I would switch from listening mode to talking mode. That's what it was. And then, but it's important to not switch between modes. I'm just keeping myself centered in the conversation. It's, harder to listen to the other person when you're just thinking about yourself, losing yourself in the conversation, being really in that moment. That's the really valuable part of it.
Yeah, so how would you, active listening, like you're just talking about in a nutshell, aside, how can you generate within yourself this genuine interest in other people?
So I generally find people pretty interesting overall, um, because we're all weird. Um, Everybody likes stuff in general, unless you're severely depressed, in which case I feel you. But everybody's got their interests. Everybody's got what they like. And it's fun to see what makes people tick, what makes people like what they like. And everybody's got a different story with that. Everybody's got a different kind of perspective. And looking to people and figuring them out is an interesting thing. We've all got something to learn and we've all got something to teach. It's not a one for one transaction. It's a sharing of yourself with another person. That's what a conversation is. And the social exchange is the benefit at that point because, we're animals. We have, it's like two birds chirping at each other. If it feels a social role, it makes us feel good to talk to other people. But you can't learn everything you need to learn from just reading about it. You have to share in other people's lived experiences. You can get some of that through books, but some of it's just through real conversations with other people, understanding the way other people live and their perspectives, learning about people whose lives you've never even thought about before. You can find all sorts of things to when you really dig into what makes people interesting. Everybody's got something everybody's mind is something you'll never have direct access to. So it's really interesting to see how other people's minds work and churn out information. And it's just living in a way where you're interested in everything makes you interesting too. And I think that's a good way to go about it. Just be as interested as you can in the world, and that'll make you interesting as one side effect. But it'll also just fill your day to day a little bit with a little bit more mindfulness. So I would say just really finding out that unique thing about the person that makes them tick is super interesting to me. And just, remember that everybody's excited about something. Finding out what that thing is really key to learning about people. And that's what I find really interesting.
And it makes life more interesting as well as a result on a day-to-day basis. So I think it's a
Absolutely.
win-win situation there.
Yeah.
I also struggled greatly with this though in the past. I find that the best way, like you just said, to achieve this is through a lot of intentional practice, like you said, in particular with mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
Each time you enter into a conversation with somebody, it's our job to try to do our best to serve first and foremost as a listener, not just what we're going to get out of it. And, wait for them to ask us a question rather than, and then, answer it concisely rather than using it as an opportunity to go like, oh, this is my chance to talk about whatever I want to talk about or myself. Um, don't use it as an opportunity to ramble or puff yourself up or trauma dump or things like that. Go on these monologues. These are all things that I used to do, for example, in the past. So, and this is due to the fact that for a lot of my life in the past, I didn't speak up. And so I feel like I've been kind of messing up and overcompensating for it now more recently these years. And so I want to reiterate that this does require practice. And so that means, work. And it's going to require, like Andrew said, a lot of mindfulness, energy, and then effort at first, but the results do pay off tenfold, I would say, in the form of new connections. And, don't enter into conversations each day thinking, what is in this for me? Just like, to describe it in a nutshell, what Andrew and I have been trying to say is approach each person and conversation or scenario in your life with compassionate, like, curiosity. If you just do that, um, your life will really kind of change because your mindset will go from narrow to abundant, and you will see a lot more opportunities around you in general, and your outlook on life will become a lot more positive. So it's kind of just really just that one mind shift, let's call it, really changes things for a lot of people.
Absolutely. Yeah. That reframing,
Hmm.
that perspective. It's
Speaking of
really very valuable.
change, Andrew, how would you say you can change people without offending them, though?
Great segue. So there's essentially, if somebody isn't doing something, there's one of two things wrong. This is what both research and my life has told me. Either, either one, you don't know how to start whatever task it is, or there's an emotion getting in the way. These are the two things that trigger procrastination, which I honestly still have a big problem with, but in a very different form than I used to when I was younger. But either way, I've always struggled with procrastination in one way or another, and that's really just a matter of some kind of block there. So if you want somebody to do something and they're not doing it, it's usually not just because they're lazy or incompetent. It's usually just because they don't know what to do and they're probably too afraid to ask. And I've been in that situation before. Or or you've got a lot of anxiety around it, and so you're putting it off for fear of failure. That was a major issue in my life for a very, very long time. So your job in this sort of context is to keep the people you're changing or making do something, or however, your job is to help them do that. If you're like the leader of a team or whatever, your job is to keep your people ready. Your job is to help the people do what they need to do. And so, you're a sergeant in like this analogy. You have to make sure your group is prepared and ready. And it's on you if they aren't ready. You can't just expect people to be independent by themselves. You have to help them be independent. They have to know what they're doing. That confidence in them has to be built up. Their confidence in themselves before you expand outward. So doing that, and so to answer the question directly, you change people by building them up. You create an environment for them to grow in. And from there, that's when you get people, listening because they understand what you want, and you listen to them too, because they understand what they're doing and what they want. So when you create that kind of lasting connection and that lasting, shift, then you're doing a great job as a leader. You're doing better. You're keeping your people ready, and you're not going to have to change them. You're not going to have to make them do things. You're not going to offend them because they understand what's going on and how to improve and how to do the task.
Yeah, something that I used to be really bad at back in the day was like, and I still catch myself doing this sometimes too, is giving orders instead of asking questions. This is like a leftover archetype of mine from my time when I was serving in multiple leadership roles with USD Esports. You can attest to this, Andrew, I know, since you were right there with me. This is, in fact, a principle straight from the book, too, about how asking questions rather than giving orders is a much faster track to getting what you want. And more often than not, what we want in most professional cases is for someone to do something for us. And that usually means to change whatever it is that they're doing at that exact moment. So when you ask someone to do something for you, you are asking them to change what they were just doing right then and there. And so in order to do that, the most effective way is not by telling them what to do, but rather just asking, even if it is like a top-down hierarchical structure like that. It's a lot more effective to just like you said originally, Andrew. What was it? Be more. What was you said a word? Be more like patient with people. Right?
I'm not sure. You should be more patient with people, but I don't think that's what you're looking for. I'm not sure what I said.
Yeah, whatever. But something like that, pretty much. You were talking about being more just appreciative, I think it was, of other people. That's what it was.
Mm-hmm.
As an end result. Okay, cool. Yeah. Anything else? Any questions?
That's all I've got. Do we have any chat questions?
Yeah, we went through 5 of them. Let's see.
Anybody popping in with any questions?
I can't see any.
All right.
Well, okay, I will close this out then. So thank you for listening, everybody. As a reminder, all bonus book club episodes moving forward will be available to tier 2 patrons on Patreon only. And so tune in next Tuesday on your favorite podcast platform to hear a story from myself for the first episode in our series on how to build character and how it relates to habits. If you want to help support us, please join our exclusive monthly book club on Patreon, share the podcast with others, and don't forget to follow, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. And hey, before you go, do you feel like you can benefit from a boost to your morale? Well, then why not give our 7-day self confidence challenge a go? For only $7, you'll get exclusive access to content that will help you determine your core values and strengths, reframe negative thought patterns, and break old habits to build new ones, all while setting realistic personal development goals. Links to our Patreon and the challenge can be found in the show notes, and we will see you next week.
Bye bye.